Welcome back into Bracket Buster Breakdown. We did the Power 6 conferences on Tuesday. It's time to take a look now in part 2 of this College Hoops Roundup. What's going on with the rest of the conferences? Obviously, there are 32 conferences, which means 32 automatic bids. I mean, you're going to have a lot of conferences, or some of the conferences get a lot more bids than, some of these other one bid leagues or two bid leagues, as that always works out. And you always look for, those outliers that might end up, being the upset of the tournament or being the Cinderella that goes to the Sweet 16 or Elite 8 or who knows, maybe even the Final Four. Hello, Loyola Chicago of 2018 and George Mason of 2006. We're going to try to look through, find some diamonds in the rough, see some teams that people are saying are going to be the Cinderellas. Probably won't be, but let's get right into this. We're going to start off with the Mountain West Conference. This is the best of the non-power conferences by far. We are looking at potentially a 6-bid league maybe. I know there's a lot of talk about the 6-bid Mountain West. I don't think we get to the full 6. I think we're probably going to end up more around 5, maybe 4, depending on how, the tournament plays out in Las Vegas. But, this has been a gauntlet of a conference this year. If you look at it, you have the top 5 basically within a game of each other. You have Boise State and Utah State tied at the top at 11-4. You have San Diego State at 11-5, so they played one more game than Boise State and Utah State. Then you have Nevada and UNLV both tied at 10-5, and that's just the top 5 right there. Then you get New Mexico, who's at 9-6, and you have Colorado State, who's at 8-8. That it is a massive drop off from there, but listen, out of those teams, all those teams are very good. I think UNLV is probably the only one that has to win the Mountain West tournament to make it to the field of 68. I don't think that they can get it done. So they are most likely looking more towards next year. New Mexico, they've had some bad losses as of late. They are, I believe, 4-4 in their last 8, which definitely does not help their resume. I think they're kind of on the borderline of being one of those teams that has to win the Mountain West tournament now. In Colorado State, they've lost 4 of the last 5. They are on the outside looking in. So I do think it's more realistic that we're going to end up with a 4-bid Mountain West, with it being Boise State, Utah State, San Diego State, and Nevada. Those are 4 really good teams. Obviously, San Diego State went to the national championship last year. They lost a few key pieces, whether that be to graduation or the transfer portal. Listen, Brian Dutcher got those guys ready again. Here they are. They sit at 22-7. I don't know if they can do a full run to the national championship again, but they've been a pretty good team this year. I think they might have another run in them, but obviously the big discussion is outside of San Diego State last year, the Mountain West have been big frauds in the NCAA tournament, as they just seem to lose all their games in the first round each year. No matter how many teams they sent, they'd find a way to get upset. And it did happen last year, except for San Diego State going to the national championship. Outside of them, all their other teams lost in the first round. So the Mountain West, it is a very much a conference to watch here. Like I said, 6 bids I think is pushing it right now. I think we're going to end more up at 4 unless we get a bid stealer winning the conference tournament. Then I think 5. But I think it's very much more realistic that we end up as a 4-bid Mountain West, with it being Boise State, Utah State, San Diego State, and Nevada. You have San Diego State that's led by Jadon DeLee. Been a great player this year. What a outstanding just outstanding player he's been this year. Great Ozabar for Utah State. He's really been leading this team. What he does on the court kind of feels irreplaceable for this Utah State team. You got, Tyson Denghart for Boise State. I don't know where Boise State would be without him right now. He's really become a much better player, I would say, this year. Obviously, he had play time last year when he was a sophomore and the year before when he was a freshman. But, he looks like a very good player for Boise State out there. Right now, I do think this is San Diego State's tournament to lose, even though they currently technically sit in third in the Mountain West. I still think that they end up winning the Mountain West tournament. They will be the ones that end up with the automatic bid. But, this could really be any of those 6 that I named off earlier. It's only got to take a week. You only got to be hot for a week to win in Vegas, and then you're on to the NCAA tournament. So given that, we're going to move on. And I should say, this once again is in order of the KenPom rankings. We do skip most of the conferences. I narrowed it down to 7. So I think it's the first 5 of these are in order. And then we kind of jump around a little bit to a few other conferences just to give you a look in on their conference title race. But we're going to move on to the next conference. This is the 8th ranked conference in the KenPom right now. I think they're teetering on having a multiple bid league. I think it's very borderline right now, but that is the Atlantic 10. Obviously, the biggest news this week coming out of the Atlantic 10 is that a founding member of the conference, UMass, is departing the conference in the 2025-26 season for the MAC and not the MAAC, the MAC, the Mid-American Conference, mostly because their football team needs a home. They've been independent for the past 7-8 years. They previously were affiliated with the MAC for football only. That kind of didn't work out. So they went back to independent, and they've spent their time there. But the rapid changing of the college football landscape, they needed a conference. And here we are with a school with a lot of history, with a lot of these universities departing for a conference where their nearest opponent's going to be 400 miles away. Football it's the money driver. We know that. There's no arguing that football controls these decisions. But at some point, we really do have to question, what actually are we doing? I get the football thing. At some point, and I sure hope it's sooner rather than later, we figure out that sending, UMass to DeKalb, Illinois for their volleyball team to play on a Tuesday night, or sending UCLA or USC off to Piscataway against Rutgers in, women's basketball, or Cal or Stanford going to play against Duke or North Carolina in men's basketball. I know men's basketball is a driver, but the fact that we're just making bad decisions now because football money is there just doesn't mean we should be doing it. I think at some point we have to get to the rationale that football needs to be separate from all these other sports. They did it with hockey. I know hockey is a very niche sport, and it's kind of really the only sport that does it this way, with hockey-only conferences. Football needs to move in that direction. Do football-only conferences. That's where your big money is. And then everything else. And everything else, listen, if you want to build a basketball conference, whatever. But it's going to affect the rest of your sports. And I don't think that's what we need to be doing. Football needs to be separate from everything else. Just like hockey is. Have football, the Big Ten sponsors hockey. So if you want to continue to sponsor other sports, that's fine. But I do think we need to get to a point where football breaks off. Everything else stays, gets back to normal. And we have more regionality of all of this. Because it's going to be dumb. It's going to be dumb for UMass to be going to Bowling Green or to Toledo or to Kalamazoo or Mount Pleasant or Ypsilanti on a Tuesday night to play a basketball game when they could be in Rhode Island or the Bronx facing off against Fordham or Philadelphia to face off against LaSalle or St. Joe's. It's dumb. It's dumb. Regionality is what made college sports special. Football has very much taken that away, and football is going down a very, very bad road. This is basketball, though. We're not going to focus on football because it's going awfully. We need to get back to where we were. I don't even know. 10 years ago? That's all? 5? Is that too much to ask? 5 years ago? UConn was a very special situation, I think, because they have a blue blood basketball program. Now, it's not going to make anywhere close to what football is going to make. But they sacrificed their football program to go be what they were at one point, going back to the Big East, becoming a behemoth in college basketball once again. And look how that turned out for them. They're back at the top of the summit. They're going to go for back-to-back, but I'm not suggesting that, the teams that have fallen off in recent years, the Syracuse, the BCs, the Pitts, they just give up on football and go to the Big East. Although I do think there is an option there where it would take a total ACC collapse for it to happen, but I do think there's possibility if the ACC just completely becomes Pac-12, completely collapses. I think you see possible Syracuse, BC, Pitt. They kind of go back to the Big East. Then you're starting to piece together a football conference again because you already have UConn. You'll have Syracuse, Pitt, BC. Obviously, there's a few more pieces at play there. Maybe you get Villanova to move up. I don't think that would happen, but this is basketball. I've gone on too long about this. The Atlantic 10 this year, I think they're close to a 2-bid league. Dayton, they are very good this year. They're not as good as that 2020 team. Still think that 2020 team was a little bit fraudulent. Wouldn't have gone as far as people would have expected. They aren't as good as that team. They're still a very good team. I think that they can at least win a game in the tournament, depending on what the matchup is. But there's a lot of other good teams in this conference that could end up taking that automatic qualifier bid and then moving Dayton to an at-large. You have Richmond, who I think they're bubble-ish right now. They're bubble-ish. I don't know if they'll get there, but you have Loyola Chicago, who have been hot as of late. They're only going to get in the tournament if they win it. VCU, kind of same thing there. And then St. Bonaventure and UMass, they're kind of in the same boat. They're good enough to win in Brooklyn. They're not good enough to win in the tournament, the actual tournament. But I like the Atlantic 10 this year. They've played some really good basketball. It kind of feels like they all kind of beat up on each other, though, so that does hurt, some of these records. But I think Dayton still end up winning it. I think they end up being a one-bid league. I don't know if Richmond has enough resume-wise to get in as an at-large. But like I said, anyone from Richmond, Dayton, Loyola, VCU, St. Bonaventure, UMass, I think any of them can win in Brooklyn for the A10 tournament. Obviously, we will wait to see what happens there. We're going to move on to, kind of a close to this conference, the A10. It is the American Athletic Conference. Now, there is a very good story going on right now in the A10, or in the American, I should say. And that is the South Florida Bulls. They are currently on a 13-game win streak, the second longest in the nation. Amir Abdur-Rahim, his first season as head coach, he has worked wonders with the South Florida team. They lost their second game in conference play. It was against UAB on the road. They lost by 4. They haven't looked back since. They haven't lost a game since, and that was at the beginning of January. We are starting to roll into March, and, USF might be a team to look out after in the tournament. The only thing is, they have to win the American to make this tournament. They had a rough non-conference, to say the least. They lost to Central Michigan at home. They lost to Maine at home. They lost to Hofstra on the road, and they lost to UMass on the road. You can't lose to Central Michigan, Maine, and Hofstra and get in as an at-large. South Florida has to win the American if they want to make the tournament. And if they make the tournament, I think they can make some noise with how hot they've been. Fact is, you can't slip up come that American tournament in Fort Worth, I think it is, at the Dickies Arena. You cannot slip up there. You can slip up now at some point. I know they still have to face Charlotte, I think. I think that's on Saturday. Then they have Tulane and Tulsa, I think, to close out. You, I think, can have a little bit of a falter there. You cannot falter in the American tournament. You have to get that automatic qualifier. And there are some good teams here that could, potentially challenge them for that. Of course, Florida Atlantic is one of them. Their first season in the American. Went to the Final Four last year. Returned a lot of starters. I'm not going to say this year's a total disappointment. I mean, you beat Arizona in double overtime. It was a neutral site game, but still, you still lost to Bryant in the non-con. You lost to Florida Gulf Coast in the non-con. You lost to Charlotte on the road, UAB on the road, USF on the road, and you most recently lost to Memphis on the road. I think South Florida, or Florida Atlantic, I should say, is getting a lot of, credit given to them for their Final Four run last year. Because if you look at that resume, that's not a tournament team. Yet it still seems like they're going to get in as an at-large if they don't win the American, which I don't think they're going to. This team isn't as good as last year's team. I think last year's team just kind of caught lightning in a bottle. Lightning doesn't usually strike twice. If they make the tournament, I think it would be an early out for them. I just don't think they have enough to get back to where they were last year. Charlotte, I mean, that's another good story this year. They're going to have to win the American to make the tournament. SMU, their swan song in the American, of course, they're going to the ACC next year because, that's correct. Dallas, Texas is on the Atlantic coast. And then you get UAB in Memphis. I don't know what to think of Memphis. They're not good. They're not awful. They're certainly not good. I see a lot of people putting them on the bubble. I don't think they're a bubble team. I think they are you have to get that automatic qualifier to make it. We'll see what happens there. Right now, I want to pick South Florida to win this because I want to see them in the tournament. I want to see what Abdur Rahim can do in the tournament because the South Florida team would be a high non-major seed, so that's 12 and below. So I think they would be 12. You get the right 5 team, I think South Florida can make a run. It's just they have to get through the American tournament first. And there's going to be a lot of teams like that this year that kind of just, they need to win their tournament because they've blown their chance at, a non-automatic qualifying bid. They blew their chance at an at-large bid. One of those teams is the team that is one of the best stories in the land right now. I feel like I say that about each conference. There's at least one best story in the land. This one, it truly is amazing what these people have done. And we're going to the Missouri Valley and we're talking about Indiana State. Josh Schertz, he is, I believe, his 3rd year as head coach of the Sycamores. He came over from Division II where he was a very, very successful coach. He has progressively gotten this team better each year. First year they went 11-20. Second year they went 23-13. This year they're at 25-5. They're reaching levels that haven't been seen by an Indiana State team since Larry Bird was on the court in that 78-79 season when they made the national championship. It's a very good team that Indiana State has. The Missouri Valley is one of the first conference tournaments to start, so we will know sooner rather than later what's going to come of them. This year, they've slowly crept up those Ken Pom rankings. I believe they started the year at 111. The lowest they went was 125, I think, after a loss to Alabama on the road, and that was the second game of the season. Their highest was, I believe they were at 34 at one point, and then they lost 2 games straight in mid-February. We now sit here. They have 1 game left of their regular season, and that's at home against Murray State, a game they should win. They will have the 1 seed in Arch Madness in St. Louis. And this is a team very much to watch out for in March. They're led by Robbie Avila, 6'10", 240 sophomore. This dude is absolutely amazing. A lot of his highlights on the internet from yesterday's game when they faced off against Evansville. The nickname Cream Abdul-Jabbar has come up. The Specs, another great one. This guy is just an outstanding basketball player. He is like one of those quintessential, this guy is built for a March Madness moment type player. Given all that, everybody is kind of on the Indiana State horse right now. They've kind of seen what's happened this year. They're kind of like, hey, Indiana State's a really good team. They could knock off a 5 seed or a 4 seed, whatever they face. That's what I don't like about that. I don't like that everybody's on the Indiana State horse right now because I do honestly think there is a better team in this conference, and that is Drake. I mean, Tucker DeVries it's DeVries. He's a very, very good player. He's in his junior year, so he's still got a year to go at Drake. Drake hasn't had a terrible season. They had 2 non-conference losses, I should say. Or 2, I think. And it was a loss to UAB on the road, by 1 point in overtime, and another one was just a blowout loss to Stephen F. Austin. Now, I'm not saying that, Drake is going to get in the tournament as an at-large, because they're not. The Missouri Valley is a one-bid league, and no matter what's going to happen, it's a one-bid league. Indiana State, I think, blew their opportunity of having an at-large bid earlier in February when they lost those 2 straight. They blew that opportunity. They have to win Arch Madness to make the NCAA tournament. I think Drake has a very good shot at winning this. I love Indiana State, like I said. But the 2 times they've played this year, they split the season series 1-1 with, I believe it was each home team winning. So when they were at the Knapp Center in Drake, or for Drake, that was a Drake victory. When they were in Terre Haute, it was a victory for Indiana State. I still think this is Indiana State's tournament to lose, but I do really have a feeling that Drake somehow wins this, and a lot of people are disappointed that Indiana State doesn't make March Madness. Just kind of a feeling I got there. So moving on, we're going to move on to the last of the consecutive ranked teams. So we are at ranked conferences, I should say. So we're at the number 11 conference in KenPom. It's a conference a lot of people love to talk about because of one team in it. That is the West Coast Conference. And yes, we are potentially sitting on an opportunity that Gonzaga does not make the tournament. They have 2 very important games this weekend to close out their schedule tonight, so Thursday. They're facing off against San Francisco. This game is not being played at the War Memorial Gymnasium on the USF campus. It's being played at the Chase Center, home of the Golden State Warriors. And then on Saturday, they're facing off against St. Mary's. St. Mary's is a team that, they've got at least a share of the conference locked up already. They're more than likely going to be the 1 seed. St. Mary's has had a really good year. I think they end up winning the regular season. I don't think you can count out this Gonzaga team yet because they always just find a way. That's their thing. They find a way. I think no matter what, I think St. Mary's is in the tournament. So if they lose in Vegas for the WCC, I think they'll be fine. Gonzaga, not so much. And since Gonzaga's on the bubble, San Francisco is 100% not in here. They'd have to win the tournament to make it. Gonzaga, they have some good wins. We'll be honest with that. They have that win against Kentucky. Actually, that is their only good win. I misspoke there. They don't have many good wins. It's the win at Kentucky, and that's about it. They have losses against Purdue, which was on a neutral site. They have a loss to Washington, which was on the road at the Alaska Airlines Arena in Seattle. They have a loss to UConn. That game was just in Seattle. They lost to San Diego State at home. They lost to Santa Clara on the road, and they lost to St. Mary's in their home game of their series. Gonzaga has to win the WCC, I think. If they sweep this weekend, though, if they go 2-0 with the win against San Francisco and St. Mary's, I think they're in the tournament. If they split it, I'd put them on the bubble. If they lose both, they have to win WCC. I still think they're going to win the WCC just because they always find a way to win the WCC. But listen, Gonzaga hasn't been the Gonzaga that we've known these past few years. They don't have that one guy that's just leading them. And I think that's going to be a problem for them this year. But I don't think they make much noise in March if they make the tournament. St. Mary's, on the other hand, depending on matchups they have a really good team. That team is really well coached. Last year, they just ran into a freight train that was UConn. mean, I think that team could have gone a bit farther if they weren't facing off against that freight train, but they did, and here we are. And I think they have another opportunity at it this year. Unless they face off against UConn again, then I think it's over for them. So given that, we're going to move on. We're going to jump a few conferences here, and we're going to go to the number 13th ranked conference in KenPom. And it's the people that love these numbers more than anything. It's the Ivy Leagues. Now, I'm not saying the Ivy League is going to be a multi-bid league. I'm just saying, let's take a look at the Ivy League because we have a three-way tie for first place, and only 4 teams make the Ivy League tournament. Princeton, Yale, and Cornell, all 11-3, heading into these final weeks of Ivy League play. Princeton made it to the Sweet 16 last year and then got absolutely demolished in that Sweet 16 game, but they beat a good Arizona team. Yale and Cornell, both are very good teams this year. I mean, if any of these 3 make the tournament, whichever one I should say makes the tournament, because one of them will win the Ivy League, honestly, I'm not saying Sweet 16, but I'm saying round of 32. I think all 3 of these teams are very good and very capable of pulling off an upset. If I had to rank them, I'd go Princeton, Cornell, Yale, but I think all 3 teams are very good. The Ivy League always kind of sneaky good at pulling off upsets. Of course, if you go back to 96, I believe it was, Princeton was a point away from becoming the first 16 seed to beat a 1 seed as they faced off against UCLA at the time was the RCA Dome. They lost by 1. I believe like the final score was 49-48 or something like that. It's going to be really hard to pick a team to win this tournament because I think all 3 teams are good. I don't think Princeton win it. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if it's Cornell. I know they faced off once this year already, and it was Cornell that got the win against Princeton. It was at home. It was at the Newman Arena, so that does play a factor. They have a game on Saturday against Princeton on the road in New Jersey that's most likely going to decide the 1 seed would be my guess. We'll see what happens there, but that is going to be a tough game. Both teams will be playing back-to-backs. So Columbia will be facing off against Princeton the night before. That game will be at home for Princeton. So Princeton has 2 home games in a row. It's going to be Cornell on the road, though. They're going to be at the Palestra on Friday night, going into Princeton on Saturday. I still think Cornell end up winning this Ivy League tournament. Although, like I said, I can see any of the 3 winning. I think it ends up being Cornell because it is hard to repeat in the Ivy Leagues. So finally, there is one other conference I want to mention. There are a lot of conferences out there. There are a lot of potential bid stealers out there. There's potential Cinderellas out there. But there's one other conference that has piqued my interest this year. Every time I watch one of their games, I always find myself enjoying what I'm watching. It is the number 25 ranked conference, so by no means is this conference going to get multiple bids, and most likely the team that wins this conference is going to be a 16 seed. The Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference, the MAC with 2 A's. The 3-way race, I would say it's a 3-way race. I know you can technically include a few more teams in there. The 3-way race that we have for this MAC title truly is generational right now. We have a Fairfield team that is very good under an interim coach with a lot of questions going on around the team. Coaching-wise, I should say. listen, Fairfield, the Stags, they're a very good team. Are they gonna, make a run in the tournament? No, because they're gonna be a 16 seed. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if any of these teams face off against UConn, just because, that factor. Fairfield, of course, in Connecticut. Last time they made the tournament was 1997. So they have think of some of the coaches that came through Fairfield in that time. Ed Cooley was at Fairfield before he got hired by Providence. They're currently being led by Chris Casey. I know he was previously at Niagara. He is the interim coach right now. You had Sidney Johnson at Fairfield. I know that didn't really work out. He had some moments in there, but that didn't really work out in the end. But if Fairfield can get it done, that is just, it's big for the conference because, like I said, that is huge. First time since 97 if they make it. That is a long streak that I know they most likely want to end. And then you have the Quinnipiac Bobcats, the team that won the national championship last year in hockey, of course. Of course, Quinnipiac is viewed as a hockey school. But their basketball team this year has been quite good. They have not made a NCAA tournament ever. They've made it at the Division II level. They've never made it at the Division I level. So if they can make the tournament, that would be great. And of course, you have the darlings of 2 years ago, the Elite Eight St. Peter's Peacocks. They don't have another run in them, but it's always fun to see those names that you remember from years past, and they're doing good again. And you're like, oh, I hope they make the tournament. And, let's remember those memories. St. Peter's, they're still St. Peter's. Of course, Shaheen Holloway left after that Elite Eight run, went to Seton Hall, succeeding there now. This conference has just been fun to watch. It's been fun to see how this tournament plays out because this is the first time in a long time that Iona most likely is not going to win this because Tobin Anderson's first year hasn't gone great. They, I believe, sit below 500, 13 and 14. Not great, not terrible, but with the way things worked out, Tobin Anderson had to build this back from bottom up. And this it's year zero. But personally, I want to see Fairfield or Quinnipiac win the MAC. I'd like to see either of them face UConn in the first round. I know UConn would blow the doors off of them, but to have that Connecticut synergy in the NCAA tournament with the game most likely in Brooklyn, that would be pretty cool to see. So, given that, I'm going to wrap up this College Hoops Roundup. That is going to be it for this episode of Bracket Buster Breakdown. Coming up next week, conference tournaments start, so we're going to dive deep into those. We'll take a look at a few of the key matchups in the last week of the regular season for the rest of the teams, give a few predictions on some conference tournaments, and probably a whole lot more. So thank you so much for watching. If you just stumbled across this video, click like, click subscribe, tell anybody you know about Bracket Buster Breakdown, and we'll be back again next week. And guess what? Next week, who knows, maybe when you're watching this, it's going to be March. And March, you know what that means? It means madness. The madness is going to be here. So make sure you keep it tuned in here on the Nick Burt Sports Network for all your bracket busting needs. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you again soon for another episode of Bracket Buster Breakdown.